The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the show. In the last month or so, we've talked about two different public mass shootings. Of course, there was the Batman Dark Knight Rises shooting in Aurora, Colorado, and then we also had the Sikh shooting in Wisconsin. We now have a third shooting, and the context, this isn't about just reporting the fact of what happened, although I'll tell you about them because it does provide important context. It's really about thinking about how these things are being reported in the media, and we've already seen differences in terms of the reporting between the Dark Knight incident and the Sikh incident, so to speak, Lewis. The details with this are that the shooter's name, Thomas Kafal, 35 years old, of College Station, Texas. This happened just outside the Texas A&M campus. This man was facing eviction. He opened fire on police officers and bystanders near the Texas A&M campus. He killed 2. He wounded 4. He was eventually shot to death by police. Now, his mom said, the minute I saw the TV, I knew it was him. I've been that worried about him, indicating that for years he's been having problems with mental health, whatever it is that means. So, Lewis, right away, we get this, right away we're starting to build the narrative of, well, not lone gunmen in this case, but mentally ill, which is another very common theme that we see when discussing white terrorists particularly, and also American, I guess we would consider American, even though you could be, of course, Muslim and American, but I guess maybe it's the term, what term am I really looking for? What am I trying to say? White, non-accent when they speak English, Christian Americans. I mean, I don't know. You know the
white English-speaking Christian Americans.
There you go.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we don't need to go through the details of the shooting. Like I said, 2 dead, 4 wounded, and eventually the shooter was shot by police. There's a Facebook page which belongs to Thomas Kafal, which features a number of pictures of assault rifles, again indicating this kind of anything from fanaticism to obsession with firearms, including a Czech version of the AK-47. On that same page, Kafal calls himself divorced and says that he is Christian, okay? Now, in terms of who his inspirational people are, the profile lists Carlos Hathcock and Vasily Zaitsev, both snipers, Lewis. Certainly disturbing.
Yes.
So, again, let's take a step back here. Mentally ill. That certainly outweighs the importance of being Christian, I'm sure, particularly in the eyes of the mainstream media and particularly the conservative media, but not if he were Muslim. We know that if Thomas Kafal were Muslim, and actually, interestingly enough, if Thomas Kafal were a Sikh who wore a turban, even though that has absolutely nothing to do with the Muslim religion, the story about his faith, his religion, his background would be the forefront. It would be the #1 focus, particularly on media outlets like Fox News, Rush Limbaugh, etc. However, this is an individual who is a self-proclaimed Christian, and the focus instantly overnight, and it's only been about 24 hours here, I believe. We still have time to observe this further, but so far the focus has been he was mentally ill, and that's really the thing. Everything else doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if he was a gun fanatic. It doesn't matter if he was a Christian. Really, what defines this man is that he's a lone, mentally ill guy, unpredictable only because of the mental illness.
Right. It's going to take a little while to learn his motivations, if there were any. But I mean, if there was no clear motivation.
Well, it seems to be he was getting evicted, and that may have pushed him over the edge. But again, right. Not everybody who gets pushed over the edge stress-wise from an eviction, #1, owns guns, all of the guns this guy is obsessed with, and decides to use them on innocent people.
Right, definitely an act of terrorism, but I mean, very clear motivation with the Sikh shooting, right? Unsure about the movie theater shooting. I mean, motivation does play a big role, I think, when you're talking about defining someone as a terrorist.
Or whether something is or isn't a hate crime.
Right.
Another week, another mentally unstable, gun nut extremist of some flavor. I'm almost starting to become desensitized to this type of thing. I have to admit. Now I find myself glancing. It's hard to even really explain it, but I kind of glance over the story, and my physical and mental reaction seems to be dulled with every single one of these, where it's like, when is the next one? We just expect it. It's almost part of the culture now that there are these shootings. Do either of you guys feel the same way? Natan, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, you become desensitized when you watch TV every day, when you look at news, and it happens so frequently that you almost start to. We talked about this last week. You start to lose track of which killer was responsible for which shooting, how many victims, where it was, which just proves how desensitized we are to it.
Yeah, and we talk about how many of these stories actually become national, right? We live right next to a city where there's a gun going off every day, literally every day, usually multiple guns. You've got places like Detroit, Chicago, who knows how many cities. I mean, it's American culture, unfortunately.
Do you think that we're seeing some level of contagion in the back of people's minds where, because of the shootings that are in the media, when things get bad for one, they say, you know, maybe shooting my way out of my problem is on the table, and some level of contagion. We don't have to address it. I want to move on, but just something to think about. Juan Cole has a great article up on his website, juancole.com, about the top 10 differences between white terrorists and others, at least from the point of view of how it's reported in mainstream media. And these are fascinating because they really sum up exactly what we've been talking about on this show for years at this point when it comes to domestic terrorism versus so-called, foreign terrorism, I guess would be the distinction to make, or non-white terrorism as it is here. White terrorists are called gunmen. What does that even mean? A person with a gun? Wouldn't that be like everyone in the U.S. who owns guns? Other terrorists are called terrorists. Very, very good point.
Yeah, definitely.
Number two, white terrorists are always troubled loners. Other terrorists are suspected of being part of a global plot, even when they're obviously just troubled loners. We saw that with the underwear bomber. We saw that as we researched further into Fort Hood. There's always the assumption that when it's non-white, it's part of a conspiracy. Right. No question about it. Doing a study on the danger of white terrorists at the Department of Homeland Security would get you sidelined by angry white congressmen. Doing studies on other kinds of terrorists is guaranteed promotion. What we're alluding to here is Peter King, congressman from New York's hearings on dangerous American Muslims, completely ignoring the countless incidents of white domestic terrorism in the United States.
By Christians.
In many cases by Christians. The family of a white terrorist is interviewed, weeping as they wonder what went wrong. The families of other terrorists are almost never interviewed. Absolutely. I mean, think about the underwear bomber. Was there any effort to talk to his family and to give their side of the story and the impact that this may have had on them? There's not even a remote interest in seeking out that story. Mm-hmm. No question about it. White terrorists are always part of a fringe. Other terrorists are apparently mainstream. White terrorists are random events like tornadoes. Other terrorists are long-running conspiracies. Again, part of that same thing. White terrorists are never called white. Other terrorists are given ethnic affiliations. Absolutely, which we've been talking about. Muslim extremist terror.
Right.
Common. Mm-hmm. White terror? Did we hear white terror when it was the Aurora, Colorado Batman shooting? No, we didn't hear that. We didn't hear that with the Sikh shooting. We're not hearing that with this one.
Right. Usually just hear the age along with gunmen.
Absolutely. Nobody thinks white terrorists are typical of white people, but other terrorists are considered paragons of their societies. Absolutely. When you hear of a Muslim terror incident, it's very common to hear people saying, it's Muslims. It's Muslims. Muslims are the problem. In fact, the Peter King hearings are based on that exact fact. However, you never hear white people are the problem. White people are terrorists.
Yeah.
You just don't hear that.
Right. I think, unfortunately, for most Americans, because of the portrayal in the media, even when you just say terrorist, the first thing to come to mind is someone
who is
foreign,
not white,
someone Muslim,
right?
Whatever.
Okay, last two. White terrorists are alcoholics, addicts, or mentally ill. We're already seeing that with Thomas Kafal. And other terrorists are apparently clean living and perfectly sane. Right. We never talk about the mental stability of any Muslim terrorist when we hear about the underwear bomber, or we hear about what goes on overseas. It was discussed a little bit with the Fort Hood shooting. I think that in that case it did come up at least in some kind of tangential way. And lastly, there's nothing you can do about white terrorists. Gun control won't stop them. No policy you make, no government program would impact them. But hundreds of billions of dollars must be spent on police and the Department of Defense and on TSA, which must virtually strip search 60 million people a year to deal with the non-white terrorists. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, it's definitely accurate.
Excellent stuff. Check out juancole.com for the whole article. Scott Brown, who's running here in our home state of Massachusetts for re-election against Elizabeth Warren, who is challenging him for that seat, is outraged that people who might not vote for him are registering to vote. This is a fascinating story. Back in 1993, the National Voter Registration Act, which since 95 has required governments to offer people the opportunity to register to vote when they access government service, like getting a driver's license, etc., also applies when people apply for welfare benefits. So when you apply for welfare benefits, you're supposed to be offered or asked to register to vote. Now, a number of groups have actually started suing states to ensure that the law is being followed. One of those lawsuits happened here in Massachusetts, Lewis. A woman complained she applied for welfare benefits. She was not asked to register to vote. She wasn't given that opportunity. And rather than fight the case, Massachusetts settled, saying, right, that federal law, we have to follow that. As part of the settlement, we're going to offer voter registration by mail to almost 500,000 people who hadn't been offered that possibility when they applied for a number of different benefits, as they should have been. So all that Massachusetts agreed to do is make good on the promise that they made, which is we're going to offer people who apply for welfare the opportunity to register. We didn't do that in person, so we're going to mail something. Very straightforward.
It's just compliance with a federal law that they should have been following.
No question. Now, Scott Brown sees this as a move to steal his Senate seat, which I guess he thinks rightly belongs to him and people who voted for him that, I don't know, aren't on welfare. So he has seized on the fact that one of the 4 advocacy groups in Massachusetts that is involved in this case is chaired by the daughter of Elizabeth Warren, who is running against Scott Brown, okay? So 4 advocacy groups are working on this issue. Scott Brown has pulled out the fact that one of them also employs Elizabeth Warren's daughter. Therefore, I guess those people shouldn't be allowed to vote, right?
It's a conspiracy.
I mean, it's a conspiracy, no question about it. So the Brown campaign put out this statement that was very whiny. It forgets the fact that we're talking about a federal law, and that's why Massachusetts agreed to the settlement. And he says, I want every legal vote to count, but it's outrageous to use taxpayer dollars to register welfare recipients as part of a special effort to boost one political party over another. Now, I don't know too much about these crafted PR statements from senators, but I am troubled by any sentence that starts with, I want every legal vote to count, but. I want every legal vote to count, but. Is that language that concerns either of you guys?
It is not a good way to start a sentence.
No, certainly not. When you're a senator, and presumably you're there as part of the American democracy where people vote, et cetera, starting a sentence with, I want every legal vote to count, but, you want every legal vote to count, right? And federal law is being followed here by this make good of offering these people the chance to vote. That's it. That's plain and simple what it is.
We could just say, I want every legal vote to count, but not when it hurts my chances of winning. I mean, we can cut out most of that sentence.
Yeah, really.
Just use that.
You don't even need all of it. All you need is, I want every legal vote to count, but. That's it. That's all. That's the entire part that you need, really.
Yeah.
So there it is. Scott Brown, maybe he'll be able to keep that Senate seat even with all the legal votes counting, which I know is something he certainly doesn't want. Bulls, Bears, and the Ballot Box is written by Lou Goldfarb and Bob Dietrich, okay? And the book looks at 12 indicators of the economy, including the deficit, months in recession, stock market performance, a number of different things, to look at how American presidents have performed over the last 80 years. Now, for years, I've been doing my own analyses of stock market performance and job growth versus contraction, comparing when there is a Democrat in the White House versus when there's a Republican. And the Democratic numbers blow the Republican numbers out of the water. On stock market performance, almost tripling stock market performance annualized, and on job growth as well. In many less years in the White House, Democratic presidents able to produce many million more jobs than Republicans. This book seems to agree, Lewis.
Well, okay. You were right.
Yeah. Out of these 12 factors that Goldfarb and Dietrich look at, under 11 of these economic indicators, Democratic presidents beat Republicans. Okay, now this is a number of different things, looking at everything from average annual unemployment rate, average stock market performance, months in recession, change in personal disposable income per capita, annual trade balance, etc., etc. 12 different factors, 11 of them Democrats outperformed. The only one where Democrats were outperformed by Republicans was the average annual unemployment rate. Now again, That's a different indicator, the number of new jobs created. And if you go into the details of how the rate is computed versus looking at the number of jobs created, you would understand how you could have that discrepancy.
Now, I'm just wondering, I mean, you could look at this and just on the face of it say that unless it's explained, you could explain this appearance of an improved economic outlook and situation during Democratic presidencies as the result of cyclical changes in the economy or the preceding Republican administrations. I'm just saying.
You're playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, does the
we have
book
talked about
include
that
that
before.
information?
Absolutely. And we've talked about it before. So number one, if it's purely cyclical, then the cycles seem to correspond directly inversely with Democratic and Republican elections, even when sometimes you only have 4 years in a row of a Democrat in the White House, and sometimes you might have multiple terms or more than that.
Right. But specifically, does the book mention the reasons why the authors think that these economic results were obtained?
I haven't read the book. So what I've looked at is the data that's in the book. I haven't read the entire editorial part. They may go into that, they may not. I'd be interested to look at that, for sure. Okay, so that's that. Interesting stuff. I'm sure there will be some mitigation of those numbers coming from the right, as we can expect. We have a bonus show, Lewis. Producer Lewis, after this show is over, Lewis produces and hosts the David Pakman Show bonus show. Today on that show, we'll talk about a man who unknowingly bypassed a $100 million airport security system. Didn't even know it. Detroit students getting free shoes for going to school on one particular day. What's that all about? And an incredible wanted ad for suicide bombers for Al-Qaeda. Get the bonus show, davidpakman.com/membership. We'll talk to you after the break.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Support the David Pakman Show either of two ways. Do all of your Amazon.com shopping through the black banner at davidpakman.com. You click it, you bookmark it, use it anytime you shop at Amazon, or become a David Pakman Show member, made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Lewis, top secret data has been unearthed on a website that shows global warming is actually worse in Massachusetts than Texas. This is obviously a liberal plot to create global warming and blame it on conservatives.
Right.
Find out more at liberalbias.com. Today's new member of the day goes by just one name, Hope. Hope, a new David Pakman Show member of the day today. I guess it's kind of like Madonna, where it's just one name.
Prince,
Pele, etc.
And nothing says hope like some North Korean techno.
No question about it. Nothing more hopeful than the magical sounds of a North Korean synthesizer.
Right.
Relaxing and compelling all at the same time. Okay. This is one of my favorite video clips of this election cycle. It rivals the Mitt Romney, I want to put a porn filter on every computer, which of course existed for 15 years at the time that he said that, and Mitt Romney not being able to identify a chocolate donut, and Mitt Romney being amazed about Wawa's touchtone keypad ordering system. But this one is John McCain talking about Mitt Romney. Now, John McCain, understandably, was asked about those Mitt Romney tax returns. Why? Well, because back when McCain was the nominee in 2008 on the Republican side, Romney was being vetted as a potential vice presidential candidate. Therefore, he submitted a number of tax returns. In theory, that would mean McCain would know. Did or didn't he pay any taxes? So he starts getting asked about this, and basically what we learn... I don't know if I should I explain the clip first? I should explain it first, I think.
Okay, yeah.
What McCain basically says is that, the reality is that he assumes his team, his advisors, got some of those tax returns, and although he didn't look at them and wasn't even specifically told, he assumes if Romney hadn't paid taxes, he probably would have heard about it. Not exactly the type of explanation that inspires too much confidence. But then when he gets asked straight up, did Mitt Romney pay taxes? He actually says, Freudian slip, what was it? You tell me. Mitt Romney absolutely did not pay taxes. I love this clip. Let's take a listen to it, Lewis. One of my favorites.
For 10 years. You know whether he's lying or not. You've seen those tax returns, have you not? I have not. Well, I mean, my team saw those tax.
You know what they said.
tax
Do you think Harry
returns.
Reid is right or wrong?
I think he is wrong. I did not examine every one of those tax returns.
You got 23 years.
Well, I certainly had. I had a team. We vetted a whole bunch of people. I didn't personally go through every one.
Did they come to you and say, hey, this guy hasn't paid taxes since 2001?
No,
this could be a problem?
By the way, why is the interviewer not on a mic? Like, you can't hear the interviewer. What is this? I don't even know what this... Yeah, it's almost like when Natan is off mic every day. Okay, let's continue. We're getting here in 15 seconds to the key statement that I just love.
That's why you didn't pick him?
No.
That's what people are saying, Senator. People know that.
Come on. Is that the same reason why I didn't pick Tim Pawlenty and 9 or 10 others? No. The reason why I picked Sarah Palin is because I thought she was the best candidate at the time.
Have you asked your team if Mitt Romney did not pay taxes?
I am absolutely confident that he did not pay taxes.
No.
I mean, that he did pay, excuse me, that he did pay taxes.
Excuse me, I'll say. He's absolutely confident that Mitt Romney did not pay taxes. Oh, I mean, hold on, guys, hold on. He did pay the taxes. He paid the taxes. Of course, I didn't see any of the tax returns, and the reality is that no one talked to me about Mitt Romney paying or not paying taxes, but I'm sure I would have heard about it if some guy submitted his tax returns to us and he hadn't paid any taxes.
The VP pick was certainly a nice distraction from the tax thing, but now is the plan just to have other people vouch for you and say that, yes, of course he paid taxes, and not actually reveal them?
Could maybe, and also the other thing is, to say he paid taxes, it could mean at some point in his life he paid taxes. It could mean he paid 0.82% taxes, as he would have in 2010 under the Paul Ryan tax plan. It could mean he paid sales taxes when he bought his elevator for the cars.
Unless there's something really terrible, morally terrible in those tax returns, I think that not releasing them just creates a problem, an unending problem for Romney, because the media, especially the Democrats, are just going to be able to feed off of the uncertainty about what's really in them, and they're going to be able to use that until Election Day.
No question about it. He's got to put those out there. Hey, guys, by the way, let's take McCain's word, because remember, Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, right? Trust us. We've seen the proof. You don't need to see the proof. We've seen it. They have.
He's a maverick.
Utah Talking Points memo is reporting that Utah Republican activist Greg Peterson is being hit with yet another sexual assault charge. Wait until you see the connections to Mitt Romney from this guy, which of course Republicans will say don't exist and are completely circumstantial. Political activist Greg Peterson was charged with sexually assaulting yet another woman in his Utah cabin, where he's hosted events for some of the biggest names in Republican politics. Prosecutors say he's 37 years old. He is being charged with forcible sexual abuse, second-degree felony, for a 2010 incident where he brought a woman back to his cabin. Meanwhile, he was scheduled to appear in court for the start of a trial for a case involving 4 other women who have also accused him of sexual assault since March of 2011. Heavily active in Republican circles. Now, what are the connections to Mitt Romney? I'll tell you about those, but before I do that, there's another case. In the most recent case, the woman said Peterson took her to his cabin for lunch, and according to the Salt Lake Tribune, he allegedly exposed his genitals to her and forced her to touch him. The woman was able to make him stop when she placed her hand on the holster of her gun. We finally found a time where having a gun actually helped the situation on the whole. We finally found one, ladies and gentlemen. The woman had to reach for her gun to get this guy to, I guess, cover his...
Put his junk away.
Put his junk away, exactly. Lewis, you would never do this, right, with any of your girlfriends?
No.
He'd have to be out of his mind, ladies and gentlemen. Never.
Who would do that?
It's crazy. And by the way, who would send pictures of their penis like Brett Favre did to women?
I don't think this woman was his girlfriend, is the point.
No, certainly not.
I think, yeah.
Certainly she would not claim that. And actually, I don't think the guy is claiming it either. Okay, so what are the connections to Romney here? Let's start with the beginning. Number one, this is a man who held a fundraiser for Mitt Romney in 2007 in Park City, Utah. Okay, but come on. All he did was hold a fundraiser for Romney. That doesn't really link him to Romney that much. Well, there's also this picture, which maybe Natan can put up for us, where Mitt Romney is seen with the individual at a campaign event of some kind. Okay, you know what? He held a fundraiser for Romney. Romney is seen here with the guy in the picture, but it's still not really evidence that there's any kind of real personal connection there. Oh, wait a second. Here's something else. LDSLiberty.org, which is a Mormon website, has audio where they have asked Greg Peterson, framing him as a, quote, close personal friend of the Romney family, talking about why Mormons should support Mitt Romney for president. But anybody could call themselves a friend, right? But you know what? When all the evidence, it looks like a duck, it smells like a duck, it tastes like a duck if you're Lewis and you enjoy eating duck, it's probably a duck. Don't you think, Lewis?
Okay. Here, even if there is this connection, even if they do know each other well, is Mitt Romney guilty of something?
No, he's not guilty of anything. He's not guilty of anything. And you know what? He's really not guilty of anything in this next story either. It's just really, really shady. Addictinginfo.org is reporting that a Romney campaign event was hosted by a convicted cocaine trafficker in Florida. This is according to the Associated Press report as well, which says that Mitt Romney on Monday, yet last night, appeared at a campaign event hosted by Reynaldo Bermudez, a convicted cocaine trafficker who owns a fruit and juice shop in Miami. Marco Rubio was there. The two men handed out juices to the crowd. Now, court documents show a number of interesting things, Lewis.
Okay. What, people's mouth and stomach went numb after drinking the juice?
The court documents show that Bermudez served 3 years in a federal prison after pleading guilty to one count of conspiracy to distribute cocaine in 1999. It's been reported that he was investigated by the Secret Service, who were aware of the criminal record when the Romney campaign event asked to use his fresh fruit and vegetable stand for the campaign event. So Bermudez is quoted in the New Times as saying, "Here in Miami, there are a lot of people with money who have had problems with the law. Thankfully, we all have the opportunity in this country to re-enter society when we've done something wrong." Well, kind of, although convicted felons in Florida, like Bermudez, aren't even eligible to vote without the governor's specific intervention. So given the fine voting system in Florida and that the system that they're known for of purging eligible voters from the voter rolls, I'm sure, actually, that Mr. Bermudez will be allowed to vote as many times as he wants, more than likely, where legal citizens, never convicted of anything, will be told, you didn't go through the right process to prove to us you can vote.
There's always a way. There's always a way to make sure someone can vote. There's always a way to make sure someone can't vote.
Let's follow the Romney logic on this one. Well, a man who sells cocaine is a job creator in some way. That's good. And if we want to grow the economy, we have to reduce taxes on the job creators. And, drug kingpins certainly don't pay taxes because it's an under-the-table business. Let's see Obama's birth certificate, guys. Let's stop talking about this. That's got to be, is that the Romney logic on this one?
Could be. I really couldn't tell you.
Natan, can you imagine if Barack Obama showed up at a campaign event hosted by a convicted cocaine trafficker?
They would say Obama was probably responsible for the cocaine selling.
Fox News 24/7, Rush Limbaugh, his entire show for 2 weeks it would be. So just keep that in mind when we think about how you're probably not hearing about this story just about anywhere, okay? Facebook.com/David Pakman Show. Let's take a break, Lewis. I want to come back and talk about, this is unbelievable, anal exams on suspected homosexuals in Lebanon. Unbelievable.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Hey, please go on to donateyouraccount.com/David Pakman Show. Donate your Twitter or Facebook accounts. Don't worry, it doesn't give us access to your accounts. It just donates a retweet or a Facebook share. It's free and it's a great way to help promote the show. Donateyouraccount.com/David Pakman Show. How many Twitter accounts have you created to then donate?
About 17 million.
Yeah, you've been. Yeah, I thought you were up to that.
I've been busy.
Yeah. Okay, this is a really weird story. Apparently now, Lebanese police are also gastroenterologists, to some extent at least. This is really weird. The leading LGBT group in the Arab world is saying that these tests that Lebanon is doing on men, quote, suspected of homosexuality are shameful, illegal, and irrelevant scientifically. These are anal exams. Do you think somebody says, let's figure out a way to just really make it uncomfortable for people who we suspect of being gay? Or do you think that in Lebanon, they really think that a, quote, anal exam is a good way of figuring out who's gay?
Probably the latter.
You really think so?
And what happens when they do determine if someone is gay?
Well, it's not good. It could be a year in prison. Yeah, it's illegal. It's illegal to be gay. Dozens of people demonstrated outside the law courts in the Lebanese capital on Saturday to protest the use of anal tests. It sounds absurd to even call it an anal test. Like, what does that even mean?
I don't know. It occurs to me that maybe the test is that if they find the test pleasurable, then they're gay.
Right.
And then they're sentenced to death.
Right. Of course, homosexuality, a criminal offense in the Arab country of Lebanon. The rally followed a police raid on a gay venue in a working-class district of Beirut when 36 men were taken into custody and forced to undergo the examinations, reportedly to determine their sexual orientation. Lebanon-based HELEM, H-E-L-E-M, is the name of the organization. It's considered the leading Arab world LGBT rights group. They're calling for the rally under the slogan, "Stand up against the tests of shame, vaginal or anal." And I agree with that, because who knows what they're doing to women when they're suspected of being lesbians.
Jeez. This is serious.
Virginity tests are what they're called.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So one sign read, "The cost of forensic rape, 125,000 Lebanese lira," which is about 85 US dollars, pointing out that the men subjected to the anal probes were being charged for the procedure. So you actually have to pay for the homosexuality anal test.
Yes, you pay for the test, but then they pay to keep you in jail for a year.
Right.
And you're still paying the people who are conducting the test.
Yeah, no question about it.
Yeah.
Amazing. Lewis once checked his girlfriend's ears because he thought he could figure out whether she was cheating just by looking in her ears. Just as ineffective as this.
It didn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah, why did I do that?
I have no idea. It was
Very
pointless.
strange.
Very, very weird. Hey, Pat Robertson, I think senility has to be setting in. We're moving on from things that are only the result of hate and, I don't know, hate and confusion into downright senility. Last week, Pat Robertson said that the Sikh shooting took place because, quote, atheists hate God. This week he's saying gays must shut their mouth until they can bring forth a baby from their rectum, is basically what he's implying here. Okay, let's take a look at this. This guy's out of his mind, right? I mean, this has to be let's talk about mental illness. Forget about the shooter for a second. What is wrong with Pat Robertson? Okay,
we've been asking ourselves that for a long time.
Here we go. Brace yourselves.
It's a chicken sandwich. It's a piece of white meat chicken between two pieces of white bread. It's also a milkshake. Now, we're going to go and have demonstrations over that. But you know something? And Terry, I was reading today in Leviticus.
Right.
Which is the law of the Old Testament.
By the way, let me stop there for a second. In what world, when you say, I'm confused about something, let me look at Leviticus to figure out, to make sense of what's going on with Chick-fil-A and modern fast food chains. Let's pull out Leviticus to see if I can make heads or tails out of what's going on here. That to me is a little strange.
If I ever do that, please shoot me.
Okay, let's continue.
It lays out the reasons why a land will vomit out its inhabitants.
Of course.
And it goes through a category of stuff that we are calling constitutional rights, you know, killing babies, offering them to Molech. And it says it is an abomination for a man to lie with a man as with a woman.
Oh, I never heard that.
That is the moral law that God set forth. And now we've got people in a university petitioning because somebody says, I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. And I defy these homosexuals to bring forth a baby from that part of the anatomy which they concentrate on. I mean, when that happens, I will change everything I'm saying. Until that.
So in other words, when a gay couple can bring forth a baby from the part of his anatomy that they concentrate on, then he will change everything. Again, what about lesbians? What if a lesbian woman, imagine if a woman who was into other women was able to bring forth a baby from her sexual organ? Oh, wait a second, that happens all the time, right? Because lesbians have babies all the time. Mm-hmm. Shouldn't he be changing his whole view? Oh, no, it's Pat Robertson. He's one of these nuts who's only obsessed with gay men. Lesbians don't matter.
Right, not as much.
Okay, what a weird life. You see something in the news, you pull out Leviticus. Unbelievable. Gary Harrington is an Oregon man. Do you say Oregon or Oregon? I've heard it both ways.
I usually say Oregon.
Oregon.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, an Oregon man. He's sentenced to 30 days in jail for catching rainwater on his own property. He was found guilty of breaking a 1925 law for having what state water managers call 3 illegal reservoirs on his property. He was convicted of 9 misdemeanors, fined $1,500, and sentenced to 30 days in jail. Now, the Oregon Water Resources Department claims that Harrington has been violating the state's water use law by diverting water from streams into the Big Butte River. Streams that run into the Big Butte River. Okay, Harrington says he's not diverting any water. He's just collecting rainwater and snowmelt that is on his property. One of the fundamental rights of Americans is supposed to be the right to own property. Now, if the rain fell on his property, why can't he use it? Certainly, he can use it to water his lawn, right, by just letting it soak into the grass. Why can't you collect that rainwater? At the same time, if a government drone crash lands on your property, would you have the right to it just because it fell from the sky onto your property? So legally, they have this 1925 law, which is very specific for this situation. What do you make of this?
I mean, it sounds like he is actually keeping a fair amount of water from seeping or flowing into that river.
What's he going to do with the water, though? Eventually, it all
That's
flows
a really
back.
good
I mean,
question.
it's a constant, the amount of water, right?
I don't know. It depends on how he's containing it and what he's doing. I mean, there just aren't enough details here. I mean, it's a strange story, but I doubt environmentalists or the people involved would actually prosecute him if they didn't think that he was actually doing some harm to the environment around him.
Well, it's based on a 1925 law. So again, it's kind of like it's the letter of the law, but really, this seems to me like one of those situations that needs to be looked at a little bit more closely.
Perhaps, yeah.
Okay, let's take a break. Check out the show on Stitcher, stitcher.com/David Pakman Show, or on your iPhone and Android phones. Best way to get the show on the go. We'll take a break. We'll be back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Please become a David Pakman Show member. You'll get the commercial-free podcast, audio, and video of the bonus show, as well as 1-hour commercial-free television episodes for members only. And yesterday we hosted the first members video conference roundtable, where members, after the show, members are able to call in, ask us questions. We were all hanging out. I think it's going to become a regular thing, Louis. I think it went well.
It did. Once I worked out the intricacies of the program.
Of the technical system.
Yes.
So be a part of all that, davidpakman.com/membership. It's our #1 funding source. Vietjet Airlines, or Vietjet Air, which is a Vietnamese airline, got fined for an in-flight bikini show. This is a little bit unusual, especially when you're used to the seriousness of American airline demeanor. Everything's taken very, very seriously. Let's take a look at a little bit of the video, and then it's actually interesting. The fine came for a reason that seems kind of benign. Let's take a look at it. So there's apparently a flight at 8:10, and there's women in bikinis walking through the plane, and people are photographing it and filming it, and it's all very, very exciting. Okay, so it basically just goes on like that for a while. So why did they get fined? This is actually really pretty funny, Louis. The airline was fined because number one, it was only $1,000. Imagine in the U.S. the idea of $1,000 fine for something an airline does. I mean,
Right.
it's laughable.
Right.
Fined $1,000 because they didn't secure permission for the show, but the specific issue was that there were people with their phones out on the plane. According to Vietnam Net, no safety regulations were actually broken by allowing passengers to film the show because their phones were in airplane mode. So that's the reason for the fine, was actually something related to the phones, not even the fact that there were women in bikinis walking around. Is it good or bad, this kind of ultimate gravity surrounding all things aviation in the U.S. versus how it is in some other countries? I mean, you said when you were flying, I think it was from Sweden to Iceland, it was a very, very different situation than what you're used to flying in the U.S.
Yeah. I find that to be the case with a lot of international flights. Would you agree? I mean, you do plenty of that.
Yeah, but it's mostly on U.S. airlines, so
Yeah.
it's really not that different than flying from Boston to L.A.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the airports and security, not always the case that there's a huge difference between the U.S. and other countries, but
But do you think we're better served by this ultimate seriousness that there is surrounding American airline travel, looking at crash numbers and looking at the problems that, Aeroflot, the Russian airline, LOT, Polish airline, Nigerian airlines of all different kinds have? Maybe there's something working about American airline safety, even though we hear so much about planes being under-maintained, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to know how to feel about it.
The planes are getting older, and the restrictions on maintenance and hiring practices for companies to carry out maintenance are getting more lax. So, honestly, I think it's only a matter of time before we start having major issues.
All right, you've heard it from Lewis. NBC, during their Olympics coverage, confused Jesse Eisenberg, who played Mark Zuckerberg in the movie about Facebook, with the actual Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook founder, at the Olympics. Let's take a look at this video. Kind of funny, interesting. On top of everything else that NBC bungled about the Olympics, this is probably the least of their concerns, but it is funny nonetheless.
To get to that free throw line, Darren Williams stepping into that three. I know I'm going to put that picture on Facebook. We've got every executive of note, it seems, worldwide attending these games.
Okay, of course it was just Jesse Eisenberg, an actor, not an executive of note, certainly.
Well, the first comment he made that we should put that picture of on Facebook could have been just a reference to the role that he played.
Absolutely.
But the second one gave it away.
No question about it. Absolutely not. So, again, I was pretty disappointed overall with the NBC Olympic coverage. We talked about some of the misleading and dishonest editing jobs that they did to create fake drama where there was none. Generally, I think there should have been more of an effort to air more stuff live. I'm aware of the 5-hour difference with the American East Coast and the time challenges that creates. But let's be honest, with West Coasters, yeah, I mean, you know what? we don't even need to go into the details. I think there should be more of an effort to carry everything live the way so many other countries did and create less of a narrative around the stories.
I totally agree with you, but I just saw the headline that said that apparently in the U.S. this was the most watched TV event in history.
It did incredibly well. I'm not saying people didn't watch it. I'm just saying I think it was not well done.
I agree.
They also cut the ending ceremony short.
Yeah, and cut stuff out of the opening ceremony as well.
Yeah.
Let's go to your voicemail and email. You can leave us voicemail 24 hours a day. The phone number is area code 219, phone number 2 David P. 2 David P, area code 219. Here's a voicemail about the story regarding the man turning straight after having a stroke and referencing the story where a man turned gay after having a stroke. It's from the Eggman. Let's see what he had to say.
Pakman! Pakman! You guys are awesome. I have a really interesting question, I believe, for you guys. I'm curious about these people that were gay, had a stroke, became straight, and vice versa. Do you think, like, Ted Nugent could have a stroke and then wake up and become like a vegan liberal? Or maybe I could have a stroke and then wake up and then become Paul Ryan supporter? I'm just wondering. Shalom, guys. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Okay, that's a really good question, right? I mean,
To be perfectly honest, yes.
I think that could happen.
I believe that could easily happen.
I think so too.
Any type of stroke or trauma, brain injury, I think can have effects like that.
Any number of things can happen. You start speaking with an accent, as we've seen happen to, 20 or 30 people in the world. I think the Eggman's onto something.
Yeah, although I just want to correct the misperception on the accent bit. It's not that people really have a stroke and then develop someone else's accent in the sense that they're somehow imitating them subconsciously. It's just that they can't speak properly, and it just so happens that it sounds like what a person with an accent from a certain language has.
Fair enough, but I think that what the Eggman is proposing could happen.
Absolutely.
Okay, on Mitt Romney calling Paul Ryan the next president of the United States, Paul Ryan was chosen as a running mate to divert attention from the issue of Mitt Romney's tax evasion. Well, by that logic, picking anybody is just going to create news about who you pick. I don't know that there's anything specific about Ryan that distracts from the tax issue.
He certainly could have picked someone who was more distracting.
And Romney knows that Ryan stands a slightly better chance of winning in 2016 than Romney does in 2012. Maybe. That could be the case. And on Paul Ryan's insider trading, this is insider trading, but it was legal before 2012 because the Stock Act wasn't yet law. Very true. Insider trading, but legal because he was a member of Congress. We'll see you tomorrow or on the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.